My name is Lewis, Lewis, Begley Culkin Jr. I was born at Methodist Hospital in Omaha, Nebraska on March 8th, 1936. I grew up in several houses, which is going to take a whole explanation. But the first house where I lived when I was born was 4404 Wakely Street in Omaha, Nebraska. Then I lived at the 2050 50th Street in Omaha, Nebraska. Then I lived at on what we called the farm, which I'll get into later. And then I lived at the duplex. I can't remember the address, but the duplex. And then we lived at 4219 Valley. My dad built a house there. And then we lived in Kansas. And then we lived back to Omaha. Then we lived at Sioux City, Iowa. Then we lived at Remsen, Iowa. Then back to Sioux City, Iowa. Then to Sheridan, Montana. Then I went to Wentworth Military Academy in Lexington, Missouri, so I'll cover that later. And I attended the University of South Dakota in Vermillion, South Dakota. And then I moved to California in 1956. This was during the Depression, so everything was rather poor and far in between. So anyway, we rented the farm. They called it the farm because it used to be, but anyway, my mom's parents, Grandpa and Grandma Peterson, my mom, my dad, myself, my cousin Sandy and her mother Winnie, and my uncle Pete. We all lived on the farm, and only two people had jobs. My dad had a job at the county paymaster's office. My uncle had a job as a runner for the Federal Reserve Bank in Omaha. The only other thing I remember was Esther, my Aunt Esther, had married several times, and I think it was her second husband, ex-husband at the time, committed suicide in the car at the farm. My Aunt Esther Dalzell, my godmother, Louis Dalzell, and his wife Esther Dalzell, my aunt, would bring, Aunt Esther would come out to the farm with the back seat loaded with groceries a couple times a week for us on the farm. And that's one of the ways we were able to eat, was Aunt Esther and Uncle Louis feeding us. It was good. I had a great mom and dad, good home life. It was a good life with my mom and dad. My dad was Lewis Begley Culkin Sr., and my mother was Ruth Peterson. My parents were born, my dad was Louis, they called him, Louie. He was born in Omaha, Nebraska, and my mother, Ruth Peterson Culkin, was born in Elk Creek, Nebraska. Well, he was very friendly, outgoing. He was a salesman. He sold Caterpillar tractors, and so he was very friendly and because of his relationship with customers and so forth. Uh, be honest and work hard, and that was it. My mother was a housewife and always had good food. Loved to eat steak. I played high school basketball at Sioux City Central High School in Sioux City, Iowa. And she'd always have the night of games. She'd always have because the game would be about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And she'd always have about 5 o'clock a nice big steak and potato and so forth. So she kept me well fed and was easy to talk to. I could share anything with my mom. In 1950 or 1946, she went to Mayo Brothers Hospital in Rochester, Minnesota. She wasn't feeling well, and she was going up there to get diagnosed with what was wrong with her. And I went to live with my mother's parents, Fred and Edith Peterson, in South Omaha at the projects. And I was there about 6 weeks, and they finally came back, and she had lymphosarcoma, cancer of the lymph nodes, and gave her about 3 years to live. But she made it all the way from 46 to 59. So she made it way past where they predicted that she'd die. And when I was in the Air Force overseas, it would be about December of 59, she passed away while I was there. But I got to come home on emergency leave. So rather than just come home for a funeral, I came home and was able to visit with her while she was still with us. My dad, both of them were kind of socialites, fraternity and sorority and all that kind of stuff. And so I think they met that way through the social network, if you will, of Omaha. Well, let's see. On my dad's side, his father was Patrick Joseph Culkin, and he was born in 1876 in Dromore West, County Sligo, Ireland. And then his wife was Jane Begley Culkin, and she was born in Omaha. And then my mother's side was, her father was Fred J. Peterson, and he was born in Tama, Iowa, in I think it was around 1886. And his wife was Edith Rowena Wagoner Peterson, and she was born in Pawnee City, Nebraska, in about 1882, I think it was. So that's my grandparents. My mother's father, Fred J. Peterson, he owned a construction company, and his dad was in the construction business, so he took over from his dad and the construction business and building highways, railroads, big things like that. Whereas Patrick Joseph Culkin was a clothing salesman. He sold clothing, men's clothing his whole life. And both grandmothers were housewives. There's a story that I should tell about my aunt and uncle, Louis Dalzell, and his wife, my aunt Esther. they were my godparents. And when I was born in Omaha, my Aunt Esther came to the hospital to visit me and my mom. And she walked in. I guess I was kind of chubby and everything. And she said, he looks just like a little stevedore. So the Steve name stuck with me on my mother's side. But on my dad's side, I was always known as Louie, Louie. So, and then there's another story that goes with Uncle Louie and the Rackets. And Uncle Louie was an independent businessman as a racketeur, whatever you call it. Anyway, his father owned a drugstore in South Omaha, and he took after his father. His father owned a pharmacy, and so Uncle Louie went to Creighton University and graduated, got a degree in pharmacology, I guess, pharmacy. And when his dad retired, he gave him the drugstore to run. And so Uncle Louie figured there'd got to be a better way to make money than selling pills one at a time. So he went into the rackets. And he went down, cleaned out the basement downstairs at the pharmacy, and created a gambling place, numbers and all that kind of stuff. And he had an old black man that was the janitor there. He stayed there and was a night watchman and so forth. And one night he's playing cards, and the old black gentleman comes down and says, "Louie, there's a phone call for you upstairs." And in those days, phones were just not that frequent, and they had a phone booth inside the drugstore up front. And so he said, "Louie, you got a call upstairs." So Uncle Louie said, "Just a minute, let me play this hand out." And so he did. He played the hand out, and as he was walking up the back stairs, somebody machine gunned the phone booth where he would have been had he not played that extra hand. So he knew who it was, and he took his .45, his gun, went over there and busted into this guy's place and passed the bodyguard and everything, stuck the gun in this guy's face and said, "You ever try that again, I'm going to blow your brains out." Well, now he didn't know if the guy would ever try again. So going to work is only 2 blocks up to the corner at the drugstore from the house where they lived. And every night, or morning rather, well, it'd be afternoon because his hours were, nighttime hours for gambling. And so my aunt would back the car down the driveway out to the front lawn. And then my Uncle Louie would come out with his gun in his hand, get in the car, and she'd drive him up to work at the drugstore or the gambling place. And he'd get out up there with his .45 and he'd go into work. So that was the same process at night going home. Well, Uncle Louie was an independent gambler, and he had a friend who was Frank Camerata, and he was a gambler and had a place over the other side of town from Uncle Louie. And the same night that they machine gunned my uncle's front part of the store, Frank Camerata, his store was hit. So basically, Uncle Louie had to go for a couple of months with the gun routine going to work. But then it seemed the guy that did that to the store was murdered. And I don't know this for sure, but my guess is that Frank Camerata, being a friend of Louis Dalzell's and being they owned a couple of investments together, gambling places. And I think that Frank had this guy killed. So they had a big funeral and everything, and all the mob guys from town. And their camarada, he was the head of the mafia in Omaha, and linked to Al Capone in Chicago through the Capone mob. That was the story about Uncle Louie and the machine gunning. There was a book that was published about the Omaha underworld, and I forget, I've got it here, but anyway, Uncle Louie never appeared in the book at all.
Did he ever have any problems with like the mob bosses higher up because he was an independent and not part of?
No, he got along with everybody. He was not part of the mafia per se. He was independent of that part, but he never had any trouble with anybody else. And since I went through that book and read that book, I never could find Uncle Louie in the book. So he was kind of the background guy that never really came out front. The only link I could find was they said that Frank Camarada was invested in and owned the 75 Club, which was a gambling den just south of Omaha over in Sarpy County. And the reason I could link that to it is my grandfather, my mother's father, Louis Dalzell's father-in-law, had Grandpa Peterson as a night watchman and guard at the 75 Club. So that was the only link that I could make, was that Uncle Louie owned the club and he was partners with this guy, Frank Camarada. Even though Camarada was mafia, but Louie was an independent, so he got along with pretty much everybody, except the one guy was trying to take over the mob in South Omaha with the machine gunning. And Frank apparently took care of him a couple months later. Well, it was Sandy and her mother, and then Uncle Louie and Aunt Esther. And Uncle Louie had a friend named Cappy Simpson. His wife's name was Helen. And Helen Simpson ran the best cat house at Omaha, South Omaha, Nebraska. So she'd leave a dish out on the counter for customers coming in, you know, all the farmers and cattlemen and ranchers that come in, and she'd leave a dish because they'd sell their cattle and they'd have lots of money. And so she'd leave a dish and they'd donate to Sandy for her school clothes and stuff. So Sandy'd go down to the cat house and she'd pick up the money, and Winnie, her mother, would get it, and she'd go buy all her clothes for, you know, school and stuff like that. So anyway, that was that story. Yes, one day I worked in maintenance for a while, and I had to do some work on an antenna, and we had trees, and then the antennas would stick up above the trees. And so one day I was out, and I had to go up and do some maintenance on an antenna, and I look out north over across the Black Sea, and I see two black contrails, two jets coming at us. And one of them turned and went east and then back north and headed back to Russia. The other one turned to the right, went out, and was over Akhchabat, which is the next town down. And then he banked around, and he was coming straight for our site. And he was so close, I swear I could feel the jet warmth going over me. But anyway, I'm up on the top, giving him this bit. So somewhere in Soviet Russia, there's a picture of me probably giving him the sign. Well, the first one, I was in Turkey when she was born in Santa Monica. My ex-wife's mother, my mother-in-law lived in West LA. So when I was overseas, she stayed with her mother. And so, matter of fact, she had Dee Dee October 18th, and she and Dee Dee flew back. So I got to see my daughter when she was 2 weeks old, as I first saw her.
They're back to Omaha.
Yeah, it was in Omaha because everybody was at Esther's house. My mother, my grandmother, my dad had driven back from Montana. So that was that one. And then the second one, my son, he was born in San Angelo, Texas. And I was at work when she called from the hospital. So I went in and got to hold him and everything. And then the third one was Jana. She was born in Culver City, California. So I was there for that. So I was able to hold her and everything. So my first wife and I, we were trying to figure out a unique name for our youngest daughter. And anyway, of course, my girlfriend back in Sioux City was Jana. And so she said, that's a unique name. I says, look, if you name her Jana, it's on you, it's not on me. So she said, okay, yeah. So we named her Jana after my ex-girlfriend from Sioux City. Trying to keep kids from getting in trouble. I was pretty straight and narrow because I went to military school and you just do things this way and that way. But, my son was always on the edge of getting in serious trouble. And Dee Dee was okay, and Jana was kind of the wild one. She didn't know what she wanted to do, and then we came back to California, and then she dropped out of high school, so later got her GED, but she finally graduated. But they've been fairly successful. If one thing, I've taught them to work hard, because my son was mowing lawns when he was 8 or 9 years old, making money. And the girls, Jana ended up in escrow. She was an escrow officer in Canoga Park, that area, San Fernando Valley. And then Dee Dee had taken, she graduated high school, and I think she ended up working for a law firm while she was going to college in Connecticut, in New Haven. And then when we transferred out here to California, she went to work for this attorney, ended up running his office. And at one point, she said, I need a raise, and he says, I can't give you a raise. So anyway, she'd been out shopping and found a down in Century City, where the big money lawyers are. And so she quit and went to work for this attorney's, and she was there about 6 weeks, and suddenly she gets a phone call from the old attorney. Says, come back, please come back, please. Because she ran the office, and without her there, nothing really got done. So anyway, she worked there for him after that. I don't know, we came back in the 70s, so it must have been 73, 74, up until she retired just a year ago. Was it a year? Yeah. So anyway, she spent her whole career there, retired, and had worked hard, saved her money, had enough for retirement. She was pretty entrepreneurial. For example, she attended this class on this guy who teaches you how to buy houses fix them up and rent them. And you just keep buying and renting them out. He said, well, here's what you do. And he taught them all that stuff. And then at the last bit, he says, how many are you going to do with this? And Dee Dee's hand went up and one other, only two of them. So she had houses in Florida, Texas, Tennessee, Washington. I mean, she had 10 houses. And then when she got ready to retire, a couple of them were paid off through renting them. And that's the guy's theory was you pay them off, then when you retire, you live off the rent that's paid. So anyway, she got that all done. And then toward the end there, when she found out she was going to die, she sold off almost all of them except two. I think they still got two. They had a condo that they rented in the West Valley years ago. And the house that they live in. So they've only got two left. Dee Dee is my oldest daughter. And she was born while I was in Turkey. And we came back and I worked as an engineering assistant out of Santa Monica, California for General Telephone. And so we moved, I got promoted from hourly to management. We moved to Downey, southern area. And then about a year after that, 2 years I think, I got promoted and transferred back to Santa Monica. And then I got promoted and transferred to Tampa, Florida, in the data processing end of the business as a user representative for data processing systems we were working on. And then I got that done and implemented, and then we moved to Fairfield, Connecticut. And she graduated from high school there at Ludlow, went to Catholic grade school. All of them went up through the 8th grade in Catholic schools and then transferred to high school and public schools. So she went to that, and then we came back here. Eventually, we left there and moved to Canoga Park. And then we were there, and she got married then and working on it, married an attorney. And she's got 3 kids. One of them lives in Columbia. One of them's in San Antonio, Texas. And the other one is in Thousand Oaks. So that was that. That was her family. She's a runner. She started running. She had good friends. Her husband worked in the heating and air conditioning business, and there's this other guy that worked there, and they were the best of friends. And so the friend and his wife had 2 girls, and one of them ended up getting cancer, and Dee Dee was really close to her, and she used to go down to UCLA to donate blood to get platelets for the daughter. And at 17, the daughter died. And so Dee Dee, that got her started into running and what's the Lymphoma Society. They got running things all over, marathons all over the place. So she ended up doing that, and we wheeled her in her wheelchair in her 800th half marathon. And she had 300 full marathons. And she's run in every state in the Union. Even ran a marathon in Antarctica. So she's been all over the world. And anyway, one day I get a phone call from her. This was like June of last year. And she said, I've got this numbness in my fingers on my left hand and in my face. And I said, uh-oh, that sounds, because that's exact symptoms I had with my stroke. And so we was getting ready to go to the doctor. And so I said, well, that sounds like my stroke, so maybe that's it, I don't know. So anyway, she went to the doctor, came home, called me, and she says, I have brain cancer. And that's a real killer. So anyway, but she's handled it very well. She's had a lot. She has so many friends from her running days. I mean, she's got people flying in to visit her from, New York, Chicago, Florida, Denver, all over. They come in. And every time we stop by to visit at the house up there, why it's loaded with her friends. So, but anyway, it just must be getting down toward the end, because in June of last year they gave her a year to live. So June of this year she passed a year. July, August, September. So 15 months she's gone. So, but that's tough when you see your own child gonna go before you go. And of course, they just fixed me up with my heart and everything. I'll probably be around another 15, 20 years. Oh, that's something I could talk about, my operations.
No.
Huh? Well, I've had five heart procedures, I'll call them. First one was to go in, and they go up through the groin and into the heart to check it out to make sure that you're okay for heart surgery. So that's one heart process. The next one was to go in and replace the bovine aortic valve replacement. And then the next one was put in a pacemaker. And then the next one was the Watchman. And the next one was, it was a procedure for the throat, but they went in through,
Transesophageal.
yeah, esophageal. They went in through there and could examine the exterior of the heart where this Watchman is. It's healing good. So that's 5 surgeries and procedures relative to the heart. So. And they're trying to get me off of Eliquis. They did that. Last time they checked, they dropped me off of Eliquis, which is a pretty heavy blood thinner and so forth. But and they put me on Plavix, which is another blood thinner, but less powerful and as the other one.
And the idea is to get off of it.
Yeah, and by putting the Watchman in, there's an area of the heart just like on the exterior, and that's where blood clots tend to collect. So the Watchman is a little plastic device that they insert on the exterior of the heart, I believe, around that little pocket, they say. And then that's supposed to fill in with skin and and tissue. And once that's done, then next January I'll be able to get off Plavix and just go to single baby aspirin a day. When they took me off of the Eliquis, when they took me off of Eliquis, they put me on Plavix and a baby aspirin a day. And I'll stay on the Plavix till January, and then it should be set enough that I can just go on baby aspirin. So, and I can get off all these blood thinners that do all this stuff to you. Proudest moment in my life. I think when we straightened out Santa Monica Division, taking on the worst of the worst and ending up the best of the best. I think that's my biggest achievement in my career. Well, as a friendly, honest, open person,